but it's all from this sick, deprived mind. So it all makes sense. When you see the movie, you'll see what I'm talking about. It's a little bit twisted, but I'm really happy with it. I mean, listen, it's my vision.
You probably know expression douchebag, so whatever they want to say, you know what? Go stay home. I enjoy my room. The fans of the room enjoy it, have fun. Yelling, screaming is great.
They yell constantly in Spanish, because I couldn't understand things at the screen, and they just laugh and so to me it was probably the funnest screening I've ever seen. Even though I know it's supposed to be an action movie, whatever, but it's just the joy they have when the Lionhead shows up. The place erupts.
So I live in Bristol and I run the Bristol Bad Film Club, which is a monthly film night where we screen cult films to raise money for charity. But I'm generally just a general big film nerd, and I do a lot of film writing on the side. I've just finished writing my first book. I'm currently producing and writing a documentary film that I literally just started doing last week. And I'm also a big martial arts fan, which is why I've been pushing hard for the Watershed here in Bristol to do a celebration of Bruce Lee, especially for the 45th anniversary of his death and the release of Enter the Dragon, to essentially honour his legacy.
Well, and we're going to talk lots about that
Brilliant.
In that order. So you mentioned the Bristol Bad Film Club.
Yeah.
So tell me about it. How did you get the idea to start this?
So I've always been a big fan of B-movies. So whether that is canon classic stuff like American Ninja or Ninja 3: The Domination, that kind of stuff I've always been highly entertained by. And there are several famous bad films, things like The Room and Samurai Cop. And I discovered early on that the best way to watch these films is not alone, but with a group of people and with some alcohol. So 5 years ago I set up the Bad Film Club, rented out a venue, and we show films like Troll 2, Plan 9 from Outer Space, Miami Connection, and we sell out every month. We have about 110, 120 people there, and we give all money from each screen to a different charity, and it's great. It scratches my B-movie itch, and I get to introduce a whole load of bizarre films that most people haven't seen to the population of Bristol.
And are these films that you grew up watching yourself, sort of back in the heady days of VHS?
Some of them are. So we've done big outdoor screenings for families of films like Masters of the Universe, which I grew up loving, but if we're all truly honest with ourselves as fans of that film, it is not great. But it's ideal for families. So stuff like that, it's a mixture of films that I grew up on that I'm able to recognise aren't legitimately great but have a cult following, and films that I discover on a daily basis that I think are hilarious.
Okay, so I asked this question of Rob Hill, who wrote the book The Bad Movie Bible.
Sure.
And so I'm going to ask you the same question. What is it about bad movies as such that makes people want to watch them, not just once, but over and over again, to the point where we actually have this love of them?
Sure, I think it's earnestness. So you can go see Transformers 5 and you can tell it's objectively not a good film. It's not a good script. You can't tell what's going on, and it's incredibly generic. And essentially you forget about it the moment you leave the cinema. With a film like Samurai Cop or The Room, it is someone's passion project. And generally most bad films are written, directed, and star like one person, like Tommy Wiseau. He wrote, directed, and starred in The Room. Samurai Cop was Amir Shavan's kind of idea of what an American action film should be. He was like an Iranian refugee, and this is kind of his version of Lethal Weapon. Y.K. Kim did Miami Connection as a way of bringing his love of Taekwondo to the population of Florida. And it's that kind of great naivety coupled with that great passion that makes something so endearing but fundamentally awful but hilarious to watch, which makes bad films, I feel, so great and entertaining.
So you mentioned earnestness, so there's a genuine sort of love from the filmmakers and what they do, so what they're producing.
It's the love of the message that they're trying to get across. So it might not be a love of filmmaking, but they feel that fundamentally they have something important to say. Whether the world needs to hear what they have to say is a completely different matter. But you have to respect the fact that they've taken the time and the effort to make a film, even though 99% of the time they know nothing about filmmaking.
And would you say that the bad movie is a genre all in itself, much like horror, sci-fi, martial arts films?
No, I would say that essentially every genre has a bad film to it. So the films that we show are action films, they're horror films, they're sci-fi films. They cover every spectrum. Cannon even did the film The Apple, which is a musical. So you get bad films in every genre, and it's just finding the most hilarious versions of those films and screening them. So a prime example would be Star Crash. It's a sci-fi film. It was made in Italy in 1979. It's an Italian rip-off of Star Wars, but it stars David Hasselhoff and Bond girl Caroline Munro, and it's something to behold. Giant animatronic robots. There's a cyborg with a Texan accent. This is before David Hasselhoff had his teeth fixed. He's got a 70s afro. He's wearing waving a lightsaber around. It's glorious. I highly recommend everyone sees it.
Well, I remember seeing the covers for that film on my local video store, and I never got around to watching that. So
You have to.
So getting back to the Bristol Bad Film Club, so you rented a room, you rented a hall, you showed your first film. What was the first film that you screened?
It was Plan 9 from Outer Space, the Ed Wood's seminal classic. So we went with a film that had a little bit of name recognition, and the first screening we did, we rented out a room above a pub. 50 people came, sold out. So I tried a bigger venue next time. That was Samurai Cop. 100 people came, sold out. And from then on, I found like the best venue size is about 120 people. And it just means we consistently sell out. You've got a nice group of people, and yeah, you can fill venues all around the city. We generally use the Bristol Improv Theatre. They've got a bar. They've got a nice little cool underground theatre that we can use, and it works perfectly.
Got to ask you about one film that has become the epitome of what we consider bad movies and has dominated the conversation for 15 years, and that is The Room.
The Room, yeah.
Tell me about The Room.
So I was pretty late to The Room game. I saw it probably about 6 years ago. So The Room came out in 2003 and it had a pretty underground following, and I knew of it. I'd seen clips on YouTube, but then a friend of mine invited me, my then girlfriend, now wife, and several other friends around to theirs to watch it, and we did it in a double bill with Samurai Cop, and we had such a great time. It's what inspired me to start the Bristol Bad Film Club. And obviously, as The Room is one of the seminal bad films, we had to show it, but we built up to it. So I think it was about our 4th or 5th screening. So by the time we had an established audience, we're doing The Room, it's sold out in like 48 hours. So generally we've done The Room once a year, and a couple of years ago I invited Tommy Wiseau to Bristol, and he came, and it was amazing. And actually, let me back up. First time I invited Greg Sestero, who wrote The Disaster Artist, to place Mark in the Room, to Bristol, and we did a Q&A event. And that sold out in 36 hours. Then I got Tommy to Bristol, that sold out, and then I got Tommy and Greg to Bristol for like 4 nights of screenings last September of The Room and their new film Best Friend, and it was amazing. It sold out, people went nuts. This was just before The Disaster Artist came out, and then Greg came back to Bristol in December, and we did a couple of special Q&A screenings of The Disaster Artist here in Bristol. So Bristol has a very strong love for The Room, and I think Tommy and Greg enjoy coming here. And I think since The Disaster Artist came out, it's a film whose reputation keeps on growing, and more people are now aware of Tommy Wiseau and Greg Sestero. And for me, it's a joy to behold, and it's just very surreal kind of seeing photos of myself with Tommy and Greg doing Q&As on stage when like 6 years ago I just got the idea for the Bad Film Club watching it in my friend's living room.
And how did you find Tommy and Greg when you met them?
Greg is lovely. Greg is very much aware of The Room's legacy, and his new film Best Friends is him trying to get beyond that, but showing the world what Tommy can actually do. Because Tommy, if you give him the right material, will surprise you. Tommy Wiseau is exactly what you think he's going to be like. Any preconceptions you might have of him, he is exactly that and more. And he's surprisingly very generous once you get to meet him.
Well, the impression I get of Tommy is that, and this is coming from someone who still hasn't come to the party, that is The Room.
Sure.
But my impression of him is eccentric.
Yeah.
But an honest to God filmmaker. He
really loves films, and he really felt he had something important to say with The Room. I would love to see him follow up on that. He keeps talking about doing sequel or doing more projects, but something seems to be holding him back. I would like to see Tommy make more films that he thinks he should make. I've seen too many films where people have cast him as a joke, and it doesn't really work. Greg's kind of found a good niche role for him, kind of playing like a 100-year-old Undertaker in Best Friends. So it kind of works really well, but I think Tommy should kind of follow his own dreams, and I kind of feel that he hasn't done that recently, and I'd like to see him do that.
Staying on the subject of bad films just a little bit longer.
Sure.
Can you give me like a top 5 or top 10 of your favourite all-time bad films?
So everyone says The Room, and everyone knows about The Room, so I'm not going to mention that.
Okay.
Samurai Cop is a classic. It's hilarious. It's everything you want. It is, imagine Lethal Weapon seen through the eyes of an alien, written in an alien language, and then run through Google Translate. That is Samurai Cop. It's hilarious. Everything that could go wrong in that film goes wrong. They stopped filming 6 months into production, and the main actor, Matt Hannon, got his hair cut. Then they needed to do reshoots. They put a Cher wig on him, and in several of the fight scenes, you can see it fall off, and he's there trying to adjust it. So Samurai Cop. Miami Connection, which is about a Taekwondo rock band fighting drug smuggling ninjas in Orlando. As you do. That is from YK Kim, who's a Taekwondo expert and also a motivational speaker. But again, that is a very endearing message about friendship and how Taekwondo can heal the world, put against the backdrop of drug smuggling ninjas and gratuitous violence and decapitation. It's great. And also Raw, which is a passion project by Noel Marshall, who was the producer of The Exorcist. And he married Tippi Hedren, who was the star of The Birds, and they loved big cats, as in lions and tigers. And they decided to make a film about that, but what they decided to do was raise their family with lions and tigers so that they could act with them. So what you have is Tippi Hedren and Noel Marshall and their kids, including Melanie Griffith, being chased around this house by actual lions and tigers, getting rugby tackled by them, and it's all real. If you think special effects make films look fake, watch the trailer for Raw. Just put Raw trailer into YouTube and you won't believe your eyes. You'll see people getting rugby tackled by lions. About 40 people suffered injuries on this film. Melanie Griffith had facial reconstructive surgery. Jan de Bont, who directed Speed and was the cinematographer on Die Hard, this was one of his first jobs. He got scalped by a lion. Tippi Hedren had her leg broken by an elephant. It's insane. And watching it, you feel terrified watching what's going on. You can't believe this film was ever made. Nothing like it will ever be made again, and it's fascinating to watch.
Sounds amazing.
It's insane.
Another thing to add to my list then. So, right, well, let's move on. Let's talk about the book that I've heard about and that we were talking about earlier, and that is Born to be Bad.
Sure.
It's actually, the title's a bit misleading unless you've seen the cover. It's actually not about bad movies, it's about bad guys.
Yeah, so...
Specifically from the 80s. It's your book, so please tell us more.
So it's called Born to be Bad, talking to the greatest villains in action cinema. So I grew up watching, like so many people did, the films of Arnie, the films of Stallone, Van Damme, all the great action films. And last January I was at our local multiplex, The Cube, and they were doing a special screening of RoboCop.
The original.
The original RoboCop. So I was there watching it with some friends, and I was like, man, all the guys playing the bad guys in this look like they had a great time. A great time. I wonder how they got cast in this film. Like Kurtwood Smith, he generally plays bad guys, but he's not who you'd think of as like to play like a drug smuggling henchman, Clarence Boddicker. So cycling home, I was like, I would love to interview all the people that played bad guys in my favourite films. And that very week, I started planning it. And over the course of 9 months, I tracked down over 25 actors who played bad guys in my favourite action films. So I got Ronnie Cox, who plays Dick Jones in RoboCop and Cohagen in Total Recall. Vernon Wells, who plays Bennett in Commando and Wes in Mad Max 2. Bob Wall, who played O'Hara in Enter the Dragon. Most of the surviving terrorists from Die Hard. Stephen Burkoff from Rambo 2 and Octopussy in Beverly Hills Cop.
Some big names.
Some big names. I mean, there were some names I really wanted to get that I couldn't get. But basically, if you love action films, you'll just flick through this going, oh, that guy, like Al Leong, who plays every Asian henchman in every 80s action film. I managed to get an interview with him. Sven Olin Thorson, who's like Arnie's best friend and holds the record for being killed on screen by Arnie more times than any other actor. It was great, and all these actors had such great stories about the films they worked on, and all of them had different takes on whether being cast as bad guys in these films was a benefit for their career or it was a hindrance. Did they get typecast afterwards? And my book's set to come out in the next month, so I'm kind of doing a bit of promotion. I've set up a Facebook page called Born to Be Bad Book. I'm on Twitter at Timon Singh, shamelessly promoting it. But yeah, it's hopefully something I'm really keen to get out there.
But without giving too much away, I want people to come and read the book, but what was the sense that you've got, what was the common thread you've got from talking to all these guys about how they felt playing these roles that are iconic, really, to us? What was the common thing that they all said, a theme that you got?
The great thing is there wasn't one inherently common theme, because all these people came from different places. So I interviewed powerlifters and bodybuilders. Some of them were ballerinas. Some of them were traditional experienced stage British actors. Others were just kind of, hey, they were models and they ended up in this film. So everyone kind of had different expectations, and some of these films launched their careers in ways they never thought possible. Others got them stereotyped for a few years. Some actors were very surprised. I thought of them primarily as a villain. So one actor I was keen to talk to is the British actor David Warner. So many of you might know him as Sark in Tron. He's been in, he was Jack the Ripper in Time After Time. He's got one of those faces where you see him and go, oh, he's the bad guy. He's like Billy Zane's henchman in Titanic. He's been in loads of films, generally as a bad guy. And when I talked to him, he was like, why do you see me as a bad guy? I was in The Omen, I'm a good guy in that. I was like, and I just listed all these films where he's a villain, and he was like, oh yeah, no, I get it. Okay, fair enough. But he generally didn't think of himself as someone who's primarily played bad guys. But to me, I've seen just so many films where he's a villain. And then there are other actors like William Sadler, who plays Colonel Stewart in Die Hard 2. He's played a few villain roles, but then he did stuff like where he played the Grim Reaper in Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey, and he's been in loads of Frank Darabont films like The Shawshank Redemption. So he's kind of been able to mix it up, whereas other actors were kind of like, oh no, I keep getting cast as a henchman, or I kept getting cast as this particular type. So everyone had a different story, and I think that's what I was most surprised by.
Looking at the villains of yesterday, do you think that the bad guys of modern cinema have kind of lost something that they have? I mean, think about, you mentioned Clarence Boddicker, Smith, and of course the late Alan Rickman as Hans Gruber in Die Hard, which turned 30 today, I believe.
It turns 30 on the 12th of July.
Okay.
Yeah, 12th of July.
Well, we get it. We're nearly there. But there was something...
I just know that off the top of my head, clearly.
There was something about those characters and those actors, they were more than just sneering. They were quite intelligent, menacing,
Yeah.
and of course, nearly all of them were British. Do you think, like I said, modern villains lack something that those guys have?
I think with the case of Alan Rickman, that was his first film role. And they wanted him for that because the producers and director had seen him on stage. And he has this quote where he goes, "I don't play villains, I play interesting characters," which is what I've got at the beginning of my book. And I don't think he ever saw himself as a bad guy. He's just a guy trying to get things done. He's not, he's an exceptional thief, as he calls himself in Die Hard. So I think he wanted to bring a level of sophistication and charm to the role because he didn't know how to just be a generic one-dimensional bad guy. So I think it all comes down to the actor and the choices they make. What I feel is that these days some actors don't get the freedom to bring that. Some people do. You get, even in some of the big Marvel movies, you see that people like Michael B. Jordan in Black Panther, and even Josh Brolin in the latest Avenger films. I feel that they've got a lot more freedom to bring more humanity and gravitas to those roles. But in the bigger, more generic action films like the Expendables films, let's just pick them out of the air. I don't think Jean-Claude Van Damme had much to do in that. Same with Eric Roberts. The main bad guy in John Wick 2, I don't feel had enough to do. I kind of like it where you kind of get an actor cast against type. So I think his name's Mathau Almaric. In Quantum of Solace, he plays Dominic Greene.
Oh yeah, yes.
You look at him and you go, this guy is going to get beaten up by James Bond because he doesn't look like a typical villain. And in the final fight, he's just there screaming, waving an axe at James Bond. And it brings something more interesting to the role than, as of this date, the rumor is that Mark Strong's going to be the bad guy in the next Bond film.
That'd be interesting.
It'll be interesting. At the same time, it's kind of like, it's a more obvious choice. So I kind of like the choices that flip it on their head a bit. So I can see Mark Strong going toe-to-toe with Daniel Craig, but someone like Steven Berkoff, who's kind of got that slight level of craziness behind the eyes, coupled with that English stage presence, I think films back then were more willing to take a risk, and studios generally, for the most part, play it safer.
But is there anybody from those days that you would like to have been able to feature in the book, and either couldn't because they weren't available, or because they've sadly passed away?
So there were loads that I would love to have interviewed who sadly passed away. Ricardo Montalban, simply because I'm a big Star Trek fan, I would have loved to have spoken to him about that. Playing Khan. I would have loved to have spoken to Clancy Brown, who played the Kurgan in Highlander. I tried hard to get him, but I was writing this book the year after the 30th anniversary of Highlander, and I think by all accounts he was interviewed out. He was done talking about that film, and I totally get it. Maybe next time, Volume 2. I couldn't get an interview with Kurtwood Smith. That man is always acting. But there are, I have a list of actors. I managed to get like a lot, but some either through just not being able to make it happen for various reasons, or they were too busy, I couldn't do it. People like Robert Darby, I feel, would have been fascinating to talk to. And then there were actors we lost, like Derek O'Connor died yesterday from Lethal Weapon 2. I managed to interview him for my book, but his colleague Josh Ackland, who played the South African ambassador, he was very ill while I was writing my book, and I wasn't able to interview him, so he would have been a delight to interview as well.
And it's looking to be released in the next month.
Next month, end of July, early August. I'm putting the pressure on my publisher. I want it out now. It's been too long. I sent them everything in December. I'm impatient now.
Okay, did you hear that, publishers? Come on with it. No, I'm sure they don't want that. So, another project you're working on is the documentary, Last Action Heroes. Yeah,
so this has only happened in the past week. So I've been hired as a writer-producer on a documentary feature called In Search of the Last Action Heroes. And it's the brainchild of Oliver Harper, who's a very popular YouTuber who does all these retrospectives of great 80s action films. So I'm sure a lot of your audience know who he is. He's got like 100,000 subscribers. So I've basically been brought on the back of writing my book to help him kind of get as many guests as we can for the documentary. So it's going to be a look back at all the great action films. And so basically we're in the preliminary stages, still raising money on Kickstarter. We've kind of smashed our initial target, but the more money we can raise, the more names we can get. So I think as of the recording of this interview, we've got 10 days left. So if you're a big action film fan, find us on Kickstarter. It's called In Search of the Last Action Heroes. Throw your support behind us, and we hopefully we can go for some of the bigger names. But I'm very impressed with the lineup that we've got so far, and hopefully we'll be able to add some more along the way.
Sounds great. Look forward to it. And yeah, everybody, find the Kickstarter page and get supported. So let's wrap up and talk about an upcoming event that you're presenting. It's going to be a big thing, not just for film fans, but martial artists.
On my t-shirt.
On your t-shirt.
Yeah.
The late and very, very great Bruce Lee.
Yeah.
Now, you are hosting a special screening here at the Watershed on this interview. So tell me a little about the screening. What format is it going to take? Will there be a Q&A, or are you just going to present it?
Yeah, so I've always been a big martial arts film fan. I grew up watching Bruce Lee films, Jackie Chan films, Jet Li films. And this year it's the 45th anniversary of Bruce Lee's death and the release of Enter the Dragon. So I felt kind of strongly that we should do something to honour that. So I approached the Watershed with the idea of doing some sort of Bruce Lee celebration, and they backed me 100% and agreed to do the special screening of Enter the Dragon. And they asked me to introduce it. So what it's going to be basically is just me introducing the film, and then a 45th anniversary a special screening of Enter the Dragon. So what I feel this is, it's an opportunity for people who might know who Bruce Lee is, but don't know who Bruce Lee is, or have heard about Enter the Dragon that haven't seen it. So I'm sure our audience is going to be a mixture of Bruce Lee experts, martial arts fans, but I'm hoping also to get people who might have just cursorily heard of Bruce Lee. They've seen a few martial art films, and so what I'm hoping to do when I introduce the film is not kind of do the usual thing about who Bruce Lee is. You know, he's the creator of Jeet Kune Do, he was in all these films. I'm hoping to kind of talk more about his legacy and how, by being essentially the first Chinese-American superstar, he opened the gates for a whole new range of diverse actors that we have today. I mean, diversity in Hollywood is such a big thing, and even for someone like me who's half Indian growing up, you didn't see many non-white heroes on the big screen. I mean, I love people like Arnie and Stallone, but I was drawn more to Bruce Lee and Jackie Chan because they were different compared to what you were generally guessing. So he's a big inspiration to me, and I'm hoping to talk not just about his influence but also about his legacy and how Enter the Dragon opened the door to non-white actors in the action genre, and hopefully it's something, you know, that has led to people like Donnie Yen being in Star Wars. It's led to Jackie Chan breaking America. It hasn't happened as fast as I imagine Bruce Lee would have wanted it to happen.
I was going to ask you, actually, when Bruce Lee exploded, and he literally did explode onto the scene, because it was catapulted by his death as well.
Sure.
Why do you think it took so long for Hollywood to truly embrace an Asian American or an Asian, like say, person, non-white character to take the lead in an action film? Why?
Well, like you said, it only exploded after his death. So, I mean, Bruce Lee had been working in America for a long time. He'd been in the Green Hornet, but the prejudices of the time meant that he could only be a supporting actor and not the star, which is why his passion project Kung Fu went to David Carradine instead of him. And that is through that frustration why he went to Hong Kong and made films like Big Boss and Fist of Fury. So I think it is because of the entrenched mentality of Hollywood that they're constantly being surprised. It's like a Chinese star can never headline a film, no one will see it, Enter the Dragon changed that. And they constantly have to be reminded of that fact. I mean, even this year, it's like for ages Hollywood's been saying an all-black cast could never really do well. It might play well domestically. Black actors never play well internationally. And then Black Panther went on to make $1 billion worldwide. It seems they're always using the same excuses for why they can't do it. And only when someone else rolls the dice and takes a gamble and it's a success do people go, oh, it was a success. And then you kind of get a brief trying to capitalize on that, and then people forget again. So I think Hollywood has always had a very short memory, which is why you've had Asian stars coming in fits and bursts. You have Bruce Lee, and then you have the whole Kung Fu craze that even James Bond films like The Man with the Golden Gun tried to rise for a while. And then you have stars like Jim Kelly in the blaxploitation films, but they're never the mainstream. And then you have John Woo bringing people like Chow Yun-fat to America. But Chow Yun-fat is in a few films, he's in like Pirates of the Caribbean, but he never breaks it big. Jackie Chan comes here, makes a few films, but he's never constantly an A-list star. It's the same with Donnie Yen, because again, I don't feel Hollywood's ever really fully confident putting a non-white lead in these films. Fortunately, they get proven wrong, but you always need a film like Black Panther, or you need a film that just shakes that up. And I'm hopefully, films like Crazy Rich Asians, which is, it's a rom-com, but headlined by an entire Asian cast, will show Hollywood that you don't have to just kind of stereotype ethnic minorities in a particular genre.
It's odd, though, that Hollywood doesn't embrace them as well, even now. When you think that the success of Jackie Chan and Donnie Yen's films and Michelle Yeoh's films in their Hong Kong years paved the way for their entry to America, albeit slowly.
Yeah.
But those films were already big in America, in Europe.
Yeah.
So the demand was there, the adulation was there. It's still quite it's still
exactly. These actors have a built-in audience. Like Michelle Yeoh, on the back of roles in like Police Story 3 Supercop, was in Tomorrow Never Dies. But then Hollywood never capitalized on her, and she always did smaller, more indie films, or just went back to Hong Kong. And I was, as a Star Trek fan, again, I was ecstatic when she got casted in Star Trek Discovery, because if ever there's a show that, has headline diversity, it's always been Star Trek. But it's kind of always been surprising that Hollywood doesn't capitalize on these built-in audiences. I've always surprised. Currently, there's a big a phase where they're casting Chinese actors like Li Bingbing in films like X-Men and The Meg to cater to the Chinese audience, which I get. But you can do that by, instead of just putting them in token roles, getting big Chinese actors and putting them in lead roles. It's the same with Indian actors. I'm always surprised that a franchise like James Bond or Star Wars hasn't taken someone like Shah Rukh Khan and put them in a key role. This is a man who's got something like 35 million followers on Twitter. That's more than someone like Kanye West and Kim Kardashian and Justin Bieber or something. It's amazing how kind of, for an industry that's built all around the money, they don't kind of think about that, and they're kind of entrenched in their, well, people wouldn't want to see that. It's like maybe the people you think don't want to see that, but there is an entire 2/3 of the rest of the world that would love to see Shah Rukh Khan as a bad guy in a James Bond film, or any Bollywood star in a Star Wars film. And of course, you're going to piss off a very vocal minority, which The Last Jedi, unfortunately, has become a torchbearer for. But quite frankly, fuck those guys. So I'm not
Might
sure I
leave
can
that
say.
in,
You can leave that in. And if any people who are angry about Kelly Marie Tran being in The Last Jedi want to fight me on that, I'm willing to fight her corner any day of the week.
So I know we mentioned earlier you're working on the documentary In Search of the Last Action Heroes. What else have you got lined up that's going to keep you busy over the next couple of years
So
or so?
I'm being contemplating about taking the Bad Film Club on the road, taking it to cities outside of Bristol. I think there's a big audience in the wake of the disaster artist for people to see these kind of cult films. So I've been thinking about touring with the Bad Film Club, doing screenings of Samurai Cop, Miami Connection, Birdemic, Shock and Terror, things like that. I'm also working on a second book that I can't really say anything about. That's probably more towards the bad film arena, but not really. And yeah, stuff's constantly changing. So yeah, I'm just rolling with it.
And as a writer and a film nerd, doing both pretty much full time, how does it feel to be kind of doing the job that you love? How are you finding that?
Well, I think being asked to take part in this documentary was kind of like, if there was a project that I'd be ideal for, it's this. So that was really lucky. But I still take regular, boring temp jobs just to pay the bills, doing PR work from home. We've all got to do that. Film writing, look, once the book comes out, I'll let you know if that's panned out in terms of profitability. It's a niche book for people that love action films, but hopefully there's enough people out there like me that love film like Mad Max 2, that love Beverly Hills Cop, that love Rambo, and if they do, hopefully they'll get a big kick out of it.